Welcome to the EHE Fast Growth Podcast. I'm Simon Landy, the CMO here at EHE Venture Studio. This series is where ambitious founders and forward-thinking investors come to scale big ideas the Venture Studio way. Whether you're building, backing, or just exploring what startup success looks like, you're in the right place. Let's get started. Hi, and welcome back to Fast Growth, the Venture Studio way. Today, we're talking about something that can make or break an early stage startup, the legal detail, and getting it right from the start. From fundraising paperwork to cap tables, SEIS, EIS eligibility, and avoiding the obvious legal pitfalls, these are the things that lots of founders only think about when it's too late. So we're bringing in two people from different sides of the conversation to help us break it down. First up, we've got Aaron Duke, account manager at SeedLegals, one of the leading platforms for startup and investing legal support. SeedLegals, launched in 2016, has completely changed how founders and investors handle fundraising legals, making it faster, cheaper, and more accessible. Hi, Aaron.
Hey, how are you getting on?
Good, thank you very much. And we're also joined by Dan Reeves, co-founder of SUBJCT. His company is tackling content automation, making it easier for SEO teams and content strategists to eliminate manual internal linking. What's especially exciting for us at EHE Venture Studio is that SUBJCT is one of the first deployments of our new AI growth fund. So we've had a front row seat to their journey over the past few months. And Dan's going to share what the legal process was or is really like from a founder's perspective. Hi, Dan.
Hey, how you doing, Simon? Good to see you, Aaron. Good to see you.
Yeah, good to have you both you lads on.
Thank you.
So, whether you're a founder navigating your first raise or an investor who wants to back startups that know their legal requirements, this episode is going to be packed with lots of practical insights. So let's dive in. I'm going to start with you, Dan. Fantastic news that we're that we've invested in SUBJCT and we're going to be working very, very closely together over the coming years.
We are.
So before we actually get started on the legals, why don't you give us a little update on all things SUBJCT?
I will. Thank you, Simon. So yes, I'm Dan Reeves. I'm co-founder of SUBJCT.ai. We're a B2B SaaS pre-seed startup. And as Simon's quite rightly said, we have just raised some money. Aaron has been our account director on SeedLegals and has helped us, which we'll talk about a little later. But yes, we've just raised. We're in kind of, I suppose, fast pre-seed mode. So we're at the moment now developing our MVP product. We're running some test phase with both paid customers and some paid pilots. But I suppose really what's at the heart of what we're trying to achieve and our mission is to maximize brand visibility and content engagement for both digital publishers and brands in the era of AI search. So we're building a suite of products that both eliminate pain point process that's manual at the moment. So things like content optimization, as you quite rightly said, around internal linking and automating that process, but also doing a data structuring piece with our customers to ensure that they have brand visibility within large language model search, or as we now like to call it, GEO, generative engine optimization. So that's where we're at.
Lovely new buzzword there. Even I like that one. Oh, brilliant. Thanks, Dan. So, I guess in terms of before we get onto Aaron, in terms of SeedLegals, how did you sort of start that process? Was it to do with your SEIS, or was it something else that got you connected to them?
Well, so it's quite a good. Well, I hope it's quite a good story, and for Aaron too. Is that we actually, with a previous business, had looked to set up SEIS, and it was retrospective. So we ended up trying to do the process ourselves, and it was really kind of painful. It was a painful process. It took a load of time. And so when we came around with SUBJCT, we'd already come across SeedLegals mainly through their fantastic content. And also they have a very enigmatic founder, Anthony Rose. And we'd come across a lot of the content that they had been putting out or posting on LinkedIn, but also via their website. So it kind of was a bit of a no-brainer when it came to us looking at SEIS Assurance, and then looking at the options that we had to be able to raise. So that's how we kind of came across SeedLegals, and we just started the process as soon as we had the ability to do so.
Oh, brilliant. Thanks for that. Nicely on to you then, Aaron. So, you've become the sort of self-serve platform for startup legals over the last, 9 years. So I think for founders and investors that haven't come across you yet, so what was your elevator pitch?
I mean, don't know if I'm the right person to be giving this elevator pitch versus our founder, Anthony. But yeah, ultimately, like SeedLegals is for companies, right? That's kind of raising investment predominantly around that early stage, sort of pre-seed, seed, Series A stage, and then incentivizing teams with share options, and then of course applying for their SEIS and EIS, and ultimately managing their cap table right throughout their whole sort of life cycle as they scale as well. We do around 1 in 3 early stage funding rounds in the UK now. So, I mean, I think from when Anthony founded the company to where we are now, I mean, we are really, really proud that we've been able to transform the way that companies start, grow, and scale, and ultimately raise investment from UK investors.
So in terms of that journey, I think you've sort of started to explain there about some of the products or some of the services that you provide, but if you could just go into a bit more detail there about how soon you get involved, and then the sort of services that you offer throughout the sort of life cycle of an early stage business.
Yeah, of course. I mean, where we get involved is kind of lots of different touch points, right, along the founder's journey. But the most common is ultimately when the founder's ultimately wanting to found a business, and they then incorporated within the UK. That's really when they'll be coming to engage us, because the next step is for them to start to raise capital in order to then deploy that, scale, and actually put their vision and their dream ultimately into a reality. So it's really that first touch point is usually for us around that SEIS and EIS Advanced Assurance side of things. So really getting that assurance for when they are going out into market with to investors, in order to then sort of say that they are raising under SEIS. That's usually that first touch point for us, is where we'll get involved.
And are people coming to you early enough for that kind of advice, or do you find that you're having to, a bit like Dan said in his previous company, you're having to sort of retrospectively help people with this?
Yeah, in all honesty, it's a mixed bag, right?
Right.
Kind of, some people we need to get SEIS. Okay, we're going out to raise in the next 6 months. Perfect. We've got lots of time to ultimately put that in place, sort of move along with your journey and strategize with you. Others, as in we were just talking before, it was kind of like we just into the new financial tax year, right? So yeah. Ultimately, when it comes to SEIS and EIS, similar to everyday ISAs, you have each investor will have an allowance, each founder will have an allowance. From an investor standpoint, it's a use it or lose it. Similar to your stocks and shares ISA and your cash ISA that you ultimately have. So when we kind of approach these natural sort of times within the year that we do move into the next financial year, sometimes we've got lots of investment and they're wanting SEIS now. So we need to sort of start to come at it with a little bit more of a founder's cap as well, right? Because ultimately we're talking to founders here as well, and it's sometimes things are missed because they're starting and running a business, right? It's not these things that are sometimes at the top of our head aren't actually at the top of the mind for the founder as well. So that's where we will really come in and sort of just try and help take those burdens away, and ultimately just try and simplify what can be quite a complicated landscape. So yeah, it is a really, really mixed bag, where it's some founders have got all the time in the world. Other founders, it's we need to go now.
Yeah.
So in terms of common mistakes, are there sort of 2 or 3 common mistakes that founders tend to make that you see over and over again?
Yeah, it's not so many common mistakes, but it's more just sort of ultimately not speaking to investors early enough as well is quite a common misconception, where it's almost, I mean, I'm sure Dan will start to sort of like dig into this a little bit deeper, but it always takes a lot longer than you expect. And to sort of like go through it methodically, I mean, I'm a massively data-driven individual. So for me, it's kind of like, okay, SEIS first and then this, and I just want to move very methodically through that sort of, that life of sort of raising investment. But I think sort of if one thing that I see, or we see quite a lot, is this: don't wait until you have your SEIS Advanced Assurance in place in writing before you start speaking to investors. Have it before you're taking on capital, but not actually having those conversations and driving sort of that conversation and the narrative of your business over to them.
Are you nodding away there, Dan? So is that what you did? Is that?
Yeah, I do fully concur. I mean, it's a process as part of that sort of startup kind of plate spinning that you end up having to do as a founder. And I think where Aaron's absolutely right. We started the relationship with SeedLegals the moment that we'd incorporated, because we knew that we needed to start that journey. And we needed to start it with that knowledge and backup that SeedLegals provides. And as Aaron quite rightly pointed out, raising capital, even if it's from angels to start with, or a blend of angels and early stage sort of venture funding, it does take a lot longer. And in the marketplace and the kind of investment environment we're in at the moment, you have to be prepared for that. And there's a lot of kind of grunt work that needs to be done. And the great thing about SeedLegals is not only do you have elements of content that you can tap into, so that gives you kind of nice really good insights on how to prepare and things that sort of, even things like looking at your pitch deck, for example, and, adapting your pitch deck to make sure that you're, pitching in the right way to certain types of investors. So I think that really does, you feel like there's someone kind of with you on that element of your journey, alongside obviously everything else you've got to do as a founder.
Yeah, no, that's good. And specifically about the SEIS, what's for Dan, for you, what was that process like?
Well, again, because we'd actually run a process to get an SEIS assurance previously, we hadn't used SeedLegals, and we had gone about it by ourselves. It was a lot more certainly a lot more difficult, mainly because, again, you've got not only have you got a human team to help, so Aaron and other members of and colleagues of his, but you've also got things like the templated sheets and term sheets, and you've got everything kind of at your fingertips that you need to be able to kind of take you through the process. So that, I think, is really important, because again, as Aaron pointed out, once you've got that assurance, you've got to then also be in a place and be able to then move swiftly and we'll come on to it. I mean, we, for example, used the SeedFast platform that they have, the vehicle that they have, which is a kind of wraparound of
is this the self-serve? Is this like the sort of self-serve?
It's the subscription agreement. It's the advanced subscription agreement that you can kind of wrap around. And again, it's got all of the necessary documentation. You can run through it. It means that you can get angel investors to deploy their money before that you've completed a particular round. So yeah, I mean, it definitely it was very much part of that sort of process and mindset that we had when we came out the gates. Yeah,
no, that's brilliant. And I think what I've read certainly about, and what I've learned from you, Dan, about SeedLegals is you've come in, Aaron, or the business has come in and really sort of disrupted the legal the legal world, particularly when it comes to some of the supports for fundraising for early stage startups. So can you point, Aaron, to any major shifts that you've seen in the sort of legal process for early stage businesses over the last few years?
Yeah, no, of course. I mean, I could talk about this for hours, right? But ultimately, from our side, and ultimately from a founder side as well, I think there's two main areas, or three main areas. It's cost, of course. Cost is at the forefront of everybody's mind, especially in the current climate right now. And then you've got speed, so efficiency. How quickly actually can you get out this legal infrastructure and legal paperwork out to these investors to then invest? And then you've also got experience as well. Now, ultimately, the experience part is extremely important to us at SeedLegals because you have a magnitude of different law firms, etc., right? But they don't just do, like, we just focus on fundraising, like incentivizing teams, R&D, etc. Like, that's what we do day in, day out for the early stage startup community and ecosystem within the UK versus sort of potentially other firms, etc., that are focusing on hundreds of millions of dollars worth of rounds, right? So these kind of smaller rounds don't really take precedent. They're kind of put to the bottom of the pile. Whereas for us at SeedLegals, like, they're at the forefront of our mind. Like, every single founder that comes through is at the forefront. So I think the way that SeedLegals and Anthony and the unbelievable team that works at SeedLegals has managed to achieve is speed up the fundraising process for early stage founders. If it's a friends and family round, if it's one investor, or if it's a multitude of different investors, it's speeding that process up ultimately through creating a platform. And yeah, I mean, Dan, I'm sure you'll mention, but a couple of clicks of a button, you can have an agreement signed, money in the bank. And then, so you've kind of got that speed and efficiency. You've got the cost effective side as well. We wanted to come into the market to say, I mean, that was why the company got founded, right? Was from our two co-founders who were at a party in Rome that were ultimately saying to each other, these legal fees are absolutely nuts. Like, how can people keep on affording them ultimately? So that's where SeedLegals was born, right? And then, yeah, from that experience, we've got such amazing individuals that work at SeedLegals that are from lots and lots of different backgrounds. So really taking that expertise and that consultative approach to it as well. Like, for example, for myself, I worked within the fundraising space for a few years before coming into SeedLegals, and I've seen the legal aspect side of things and how long that can take from negotiating shareholders agreements, term sheets, etc., to then coming over to SeedLegals. And I was a bit like, wait a minute, like, you can do this within a matter of a day. It's a bit crazy. So yeah, those are the three main points ultimately of the way that I believe and we at SeedLegals is cost effectiveness, the speed and efficiency, and also the expertise that we bring.
And Dan, I guess you'll say yes. That's what you bought into.
I mean, without yes, I mean, I concur wholeheartedly. I think, you know, what's interesting, and as Aaron has pointed to, what they've managed to create at SeedLegals is a great blend between tech and humans. So what you get is you get you know, kind of human, you know, like Aaron. We also had another colleague of Aaron's, Io, who was kind of really his sort of field was around this advanced subscription agreement that they call SeedFast, and he you know, helped us. So we get that human interaction, but then, as Aaron pointed out, you've got the platform which allows you to, again, all the digital signatures, sending off once things have been signed and completed, sent to company's house. You've got your cap table, all kind of, you know, again, that's adjusting in real time as you're adding investors. So I just, you know, it's that blend of technology and human kind of customer service, but with obviously, you know, huge experience around legals and investment that bring it together and bring that package together. And so, yes, I would agree on those points wholeheartedly.
Right?
He's not paid up to say this, by the way.
I know.
Not paid up to say this.
Genuinely, he hasn't. He hasn't.
No, and I think this pod has come about because of your experience with each other, and I think that's why we wanted to do it, because we've heard a lot about how well it's worked for you two, and we want to sort of share that with our founder community, because we want them to to see that there are a number of ways in which people can obtain legal support. We use several, but this one seems to fit very, very nicely with that early stage founders.
I think also the interesting thing is that, and I know Anthony's out in the States at the moment, and I know that there's again, SeedLegals are looking to expand into the US, and again, this could be fantastic sort of opportunity for startups to be able to kind of start that process of thinking about the US, and again, things like SAFEs, which are similar to the Advanced Subscription Agreement here in the UK. How do you go around, about even starting and contemplating kind of those sort of investment opportunities? So yeah, it makes sense.
And do you feel? I mean, I hadn't realised, Dan, you've been through this over the previous business as well. Yeah. But is this sort of chalk and cheese compared to what it was before then, in terms of when you tried to do the legal yourself and you tried to?
No, definitely. And I think the thing was, I mean, there was a slight difference because we were kind of backdating it a little bit, in the sense that we had already been incorporated. Right. We'd already started out. So what we were really doing was we were looking at mainly around EIS, and because that obviously has a longer assurance life, as it were, and it's a different structure. But it was a painful process, and ultimately, although we did get assurance, we ended up we'd already moved through the gears. We didn't use it as an investment vehicle. So again, I suppose that experience meant that this time round we were absolutely adamant that we would look at the best opportunity to have that SEIS assurance and start to raise early stage funding as soon as we could. So it was a necessity as well. Yeah.
But you'd learn on your journey.
Absolutely.
Hadn't you? Yeah. Basically, and I guess for Aaron, for you, at what point, how early should a founder or an early stage startup get you involved?
I mean, yeah, it's mainly kind of, I mean, when you incorporate a company on Companies House, you need to then ask yourself a question: is, am I going out to raise investment? Am I looking to go out and raise investment? And usually when a founder answers that question as a yes, okay, well, they will need SEIS and EIS Advanced Assurance from HMRC, right? Because ultimately there's around 98 to 99% of angel investors within the UK and high net worths will only invest in UK companies that have that advanced assurance in place for tax relief reasons. So when it's kind of, you answer that, okay, I am needing to go out and raise investment over the next 12 months. Perfect. Well, we already now know that the next step is to get your SEIS and EIS Advanced Assurance. Where do you go to get that? We would like to believe that everybody would come to SeedLegals. So that would be that kind of, when you answer that question as a yes, that's the next step, is engaging with the platform, engaging somewhere to then get your SEIS Advanced Assurance ultimately.
Yeah, brilliant. I thought it'd be at that stage, but I just wanted to double check. So, Dan, from your point of view, once you've got SEIS, once you've got that approval, did you notice a shift in investor conversations? Did it immediately open more doors for you, or did it not change?
It wasn't so much. It sort of opened doors. I suppose what it meant that we could go out and open doors, and it meant that we could then, we had the, we had that approval already in place when we started. It was a question that an investor didn't need to ask, and I think probably, I think Aaron touched on it earlier. I think again, when you're going out and raising, you want to minimize the amount of questions that might be asked of you, particularly around compliance. And obviously our discussions as well, Simon. I mean, hopefully it came across that we'd ticked a lot of the boxes that we needed to ensure that we had done the compliance element, and we'd had put all of the main sort of platforms in place to be able to kind of move through the gears around investment. So albeit that maybe the SEIS assurance didn't sort of unlock a flood of investments, what it did do is it meant that we didn't have to answer that question to kick it off. So yes.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I think from our point of view, the fact that you'd gone through that process early on independently, it's a big tick. And I'm sure for a lot of angel investors and high net worths, it's and funds like ours, it's significant when people do that. Are there other ways, Aaron, do you think, in which people can make themselves more investable? I mean, the fact that Dan and Ben put it into their pitch deck, they made a big thing of the SEIS. That's obviously, is very, very good. But are there any other ways that you try and help people with that sort of fundraising side of things?
Yeah, I think from sort of like an objective perspective, it's just having all your ducks in a row. As Dan kindly said, you're wanting to try and minimize the questions, or not even so much the questions, but more just, okay, I need to go back and check on that. Because you kind of need to look at when you're approaching investors and potentially in a pitch, almost like the way that I always refer to it is it's like a job interview. You would never come to your job interview without knowing exactly having all of your ducks in a row, because ultimately you're wanting to put your best foot forward. I've got my SEIS Advanced Assurance. That answers that question that if you're a UK startup, is going to come up 100%. You've then got your term sheet as well. So ultimately, these are the terms that you will be coming in on. Okay, so valuation, share price, etc. But what that also does is starts to open that negotiation up. But as the founder, potentially, you're the one that's driving that negotiation from a term sheet perspective. Again, we could probably dive into understanding kind of like who sends who a term sheet. What's like, should you expect one, or should you be the one that sort of presents one ultimately? So so it's kind of, you've got your advanced assurance, your SEIS, your term sheet, etc. That really opens up those conversations. You're having all of your ducks in a row and putting your best foot forward as well, because what you need to understand as well is, as a founder, you will think your business is number one, which you have to think. In order for it to survive and scale, you have to be all in. Whereas to an investor, they've maybe got another 20 pitches throughout the rest of the week that they're then going to do, and potentially only one spot for their investment, because they have a finite amount that they can invest under SEIS or EIS. So you also sort of have to have that at the back of your mind as well, is I'm going to be competing here. So what can I have squared away that potentially the competition or the other founders may not have? I know that I've got a brilliant business. I've practiced my pitch. What are the other areas that I can try and just get that little centimeter or that 1 inch up on the next individual potentially that's going to be pitching behind me? So I think sort of having all of your ducks in a row from, of course, a legal perspective, but just over from like a strategy perspective as well, is, well, what fundraising vehicle are we going to be using? Do we have traction already through the seed fast mechanism, and now we're kind of just gaining commitments on a term sheet? Or is it that we're at an early stage and we're looking for that first money in as well, somebody to lead the round?
Okay, so you talked term sheets there. So that's good, because that's an interesting point I wanted to cover. And you said, I think you said something about where does the term sheet come from? Does it come from the founder, or does it come from the investors? That's quite interesting. So talk a bit more to that for us.
Yeah, so it depends who's on the other side of the table, because if you're a professional investor, and the way that I define a professional investor is somebody like yourself, for example, it's a fund, it's a business, right? Normally, again, like Sam, you'll probably be able to tell me, but normally it's, well, actually, they're the ones that are going to generate a term sheet and present it for, like, here's my proposal.
Yeah.
Here's our proposal. So you've got a lot of sort of SEIS, EIS, early stage funds, a lot of sort of like potentially, other sort of like businesses, etc., where they have maybe a bit of a venture capital arm or a family office. And they're usually the ones that will say, here's our proposal, here's our term sheet, because they'll have standards from a business perspective that they will want from a shareholder as well. Whereas if you're talking to high net worths and angels, ultimately these are individuals that are not professional investors. They're a little bit more passive investors. They do it potentially as they've retired, and what they want to do is give back to the industry that they've maybe worked in all their life, or they're just interested ultimately in investing in early stage startups. Usually you have to be the one that presents them a term sheet. You're the one that's driving that conversation, that negotiation. So that's kind of potentially broad. I know it's very broad, but
but there are two ways in which term sheets can be led. And then do you help your early stage businesses review the term sheets and feedback on those?
No, 100%. And it's probably just worth caveating, like, we have lawyers in SeedLegals. I'm not a lawyer, right? But what we do have is experts, right? So something's not market standard, if something is market standard. But ultimately, like, I would say 99% of our founders on the platform, we are always saying, drive the conversation. You have the term sheet based on what the information that you've told us, based on market standards. Here's kind of that first draft to then start to open up these conversations and really, really drive those conversations with investors. Because, like, we really do advocate that, is to put ultimately to have that power with the founder from a negotiation standpoint, and to be the one that's presenting that forward.
No, that's fine. So that's term sheets. Cap tables, something else I wanted to go on to. So they're things that I know Dan and Ben have been thinking about. They're things that every sort of founder has to think about, especially when you've got funds and angel investors and high net worths, all of whom are sort of collaborating together to bring investment into a business. So are there any, again, the things people need to look out for there? Are there any pitfalls? Just for founders in particular, so they don't give away too much equity, but they give away, how do you advise people on that side of things?
Like model it out. We've got a platform where you can model out scenarios for fundraising. So you can actually see, if we raise at this share price, we raise at this valuation and bring in X, Y, and Z, what would the cap table look like post-funding? So model it out, understand kind of, are you happy with that or aren't you happy with that? But then it's important to start off, but as you start to sort of like bring in more shareholders, as you start to raise more capital, that's where that cap table management piece is super, super important from a governance standpoint, to understand dilution events. If you then are looking at incentivizing employees, you're going to need an options pool in there as well. So how does that dilution impact the actual current shareholders in regards to a fully diluted scenario as well when they come to exercise? So there's all these sort of questions that will start to creep up as you start to go along that journey that is founding a business, that is raising capital ultimately. And we're there to simplify that, because before, you just have it on a spreadsheet, but you have to consistently manage that spreadsheet and trust the formulas that you've put in, and trust your own math that that's actually correct. Whereas for us, it's all automated in the platform. It's there. You can model out scenarios. You can take away scenarios. What will this look like if I do this? What will it look like do this? You'll have a diluted column, a fully diluted column, and then also understanding what shares are SEIS and EIS as well.
And
then Dan, are you using that model in SeedLegals?
Yes. Yeah. So it, as Aaron pointed out, it's sort of part of the your sort of dashboard, and that any sort of updates and confirmation of investment that takes place both on platform and off platform. So you can obviously update any off platform scenarios. You can update through the platform, and then that if you were to continue, say for example, you fulfilled your SEIS, some of that has come from off platform, and you move into EIS. Obviously, once you've updated that fully, it will then reflect that, and then you move into kind of a next phase of investment. So yes, it is one of those elements that are really critical, because as Aaron and both yourself, Simon, and Aaron have pointed out, for founders, it's absolutely important to make sure that you understand any dilution events and what that means, and and sort of be able to plan for any future investment, and ensure that, say for example, you say, right, I need to make sure that we've hit this valuation point till until we kind of go again, as it were, from an investment perspective. So yeah, it's critical.
Yeah. So before we sort of round up, is there anything else from either of you in terms of the sort of legal aspects that we've missed? Is there anything that we should discuss, particularly in relation to founders? Anything else founders need to know that we haven't covered?
From my perspective, I'm just trying to think. Not that because I think that because the way in which you move through the gears, particularly with kind of investment, obviously there's the legal framework, which we've touched on. There's the compliance aspect, and I think, as I say, the relationship that we've had both with you, Simon, as an investor, and with Aaron from a SeedLegals perspective, it's meant that both myself and my business partner have been able to move, and it is just the two of us at the moment with a fractional team. So it's down to us to not only raise the money, but spend the money, and all of the other things that are involved in that sort of pre-seed stage startup. And I think it just means that you go step by step by step, and that's a crucial element. And one thing I would add, which again comes with SeedLegals, and which they've done really well, is they've developed a sort of community. So they put on events. Right. I was at one 2 weeks ago with other pre-seed stage founders. They had a couple of investors there as well. So there's some really great kind of community stuff that they've built out, which I think, again, and I'm not a solopreneur, as they say. I have a business partner, but actually to meet other founders in the same stage that we're at is always great.
And Aaron, is there anything else you wanted to raise? Any other sort of areas of your service that you want to mention? I know I did notice that you do EMI schemes, you do the sort of employee schemes, but I suspect that's for Dan and Ben, that's sort of quite a bit further down the line. Well, or is it?
Well, we're preparing for it. No, we're preparing for it. Absolutely. Sorry, Aaron.
No, I was just going to say, not 100%. It's kind of, we do view SeedLegals as that kind of one-stop shop for founders who are scaling within the UK market ultimately. But just to sort of, we've covered quite a lot, but just to sort of, maybe touch on what Dan kindly mentioned as well. Like, that community aspect is extremely close to our hearts and kind of our mission at SeedLegals as well. Because being a founder, it can be a lonely life, right? So speaking to other founders is always super helpful, but also sort of just trying to bring that whole ecosystem in together to start having these conversations that may then lead to something fruitful and an outcome of that. But if not, it's kind of just bringing people along that journey as well who have potentially already been there and done that, because these individuals are going to be the ones that have the best experience and the best advice and things. So we do view community as such an important aspect of our business at SeedLegals, but also sort of, ultimately, like, what impact are we wanting to have is bring founders in together to start speaking and having these conversations, because although we've kindly mentioned that we have a lot of experience, etc., within SeedLegals, but also sort of it's trying to bring external experience in as well from founders, etc. I mean, we try and put on a lot of events for founders, both for investors and founders, pitch evenings, etc., to try and just bring that ecosystem that one step closer, ultimately.
Yeah, no, community. It's a big part of what we're doing as well. It's so essential to be able to signpost people and help them, throughout this whole process. So that's been brilliant. Thank you both very much. That was
Thank you.
a really good session, very useful, and I hope for any sort of founder out there who's looking at early stage funding and the legal challenges that goes with that they've picked up a load, picked up a lot of information. Particularly, there's a lot of stuff out there around fundraising, SEIS, EIS. So I think that was very, very useful. So Aaron, if anybody wants to know more about SeedLegals and you and your team, what you get up to, how are they best contacting you?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, you can jump on the SeedLegals website. I mean, start for free. We have a 7-day trial as well, like where you can speak to some of the team, etc., just understand how the platform works. And alternatively, I'm sure, we'll share sort of my LinkedIn, etc., as well, so you can DM me at any point, and I'll get you looped into the relevant person within SeedLegals.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. And Dan, where can people find out about your journey?
Individually LinkedIn, and also we have a company page for SUBJCT, but you could also find us at our website, which is SUBJCT.ai. And
subject is spelled
without the E. So it's
SUBJCT.
Yeah, my son likes to say subject. But yes, but yes, you can find us there.
Right, brilliant. Well, thank you both. We'll drop those links in the show notes as well. And for all those of you listening, if you found this episode helpful, make sure to follow Fast Growth, the Venture Studio Way, so you don't miss the next one. We'll be back in 2 weeks with more insights on building and investing in high growth startups. Until then, thanks Dan, thanks Aaron, and thanks for listening.
Take care.
Thanks so much.
Cheers, guys. Take care.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Fast Growth, the Venture Studio Way. If you found this valuable, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with your network. Want to learn more about EHE Venture Studio? About how we provide tech, funding, and advisory to ambitious startups? Visit www.ehe.ai. Thank you once again, and we'll see you next time on Fast Growth, the Venture Studio Way.